They say the true measure of a person is not what they do when everyone is watching, but what they choose to do when no one notices. Sometimes it's in the quietest moments that character speaks the loudest. Listen. Tonight, I want to share with you a story of quiet kindness about a young woman who risked everything for a stranger, never knowing that one simple choice would change her life forever. If you believe kindness still matters in this world, stay with me and don't forget to follow, like, and share so more people can hear this story. Rain pressed against the glass that night, a steady rhythm echoing through the quiet aisles of Smart Mart. Emma Lewis moved with calm precision, her mop sweeping across the tiled floor. At 23, she carried herself with a kind of quiet resilience that seemed older than her years. Her coworkers often wondered how she managed endless night shifts without complaint, but they never saw what weighed on her heart when she went home. Her family's small apartment, the overdue rent, her mother's aching joints after long days cleaning houses, these were burdens Emma carried without resentment. Life had taught her early that bitterness only deepened wounds. In the solitude of her break times, Emma often opened her worn journal, where one phrase repeated itself in careful handwriting: "Be kind anyway." It was her grandmother's motto, and it had become her compass. For Emma, kindness was not a grand gesture, not a performance for recognition. It was the smallest acts offered quietly when no one expected them. Her father's death had etched that lesson deeply into her. Once proud and hardworking, he had fallen into homelessness after losing his job. Too proud to ask for help, he died without anyone reaching out a hand. That memory lived inside Emma like a scar, an unspoken promise that she would never look away from someone in need. The clock struck 10:47 p.m. when Emma noticed him. Outside, under the narrow awning, stood an elderly man in a faded military jacket. His gray hair clung to his forehead, soaked through by the rain. He did not peer into the store, did not beg for change. He stood tall, as though clinging to dignity, though his body trembled with the cold. Something in the way he held himself stirred Emma's memory, her father in his last days, when he refused to admit how much he was struggling. That same quiet pride now lived in the posture of this stranger. Emma's eyes shifted to the sandwich display. 3 turkey sandwiches sat under the fluorescent light, destined for the trash when the store closed. Her manager, Mr. Hall, had made his opinions clear. Loiterers brought down property values. Rules were rules, and unsold food was considered waste, not a charity. Emma glanced toward the back office, where Hall was busy counting receipts. A quiet battle flickered inside her. She thought of her mother's worried sighs, the overdue bills, the thin line they walked between stability and collapse. She could not afford to lose this job. Yet her hand moved almost without thinking. She slipped one sandwich into the microwave, added a cup of hot coffee, and carried both to the side door. The rain splashed against her shoes as she stepped outside. "Sir," she said softly, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "would you like something warm?" The old man lifted his gaze, and his eyes, clear, piercing blue despite his weathered face, met hers. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he nodded once with dignity and accepted the food with steady hands. "Thank you, miss," he whispered, his voice surprisingly strong despite the tremor in it. Emma smiled, the warmth in her chest stronger than any fear. "It's nothing. Stay dry if you can." She turned back toward the store, unaware that in the back office, Mr. Hall had seen everything through the grainy security monitor. His eyes narrowed, his mouth twisting in anger. For Emma, though, the moment was simple, almost sacred. She had done what she promised herself long ago, to choose kindness, even when nobody was watching. What she did not yet know was how dearly this choice would cost her, and how far its ripples would reach. The air inside Smart Mart felt heavier than the rain outside. Emma was wiping down the counter, ready to clock out, when the sharp slam of a door startled her. Mr. Hall stormed out of his office, his face flushed with anger. His voice cut through the store like a blade. "In my office, now!" Emma froze, her fingers tightening around the rag she held. A few late-night customers glanced up from the aisles. She tried to steady her breathing as she walked toward him, heart pounding. "I saw what you did," Hall barked before she could step inside. "Store property isn't yours to give away." Emma opened her mouth, but the words barely formed. "It was going to be thrown out." "Don't argue with me," His voice boomed so loudly that the three remaining customers turned to stare. "We don't serve beggars here. Giving them food only encourages them. You're fired, effective immediately. Hand over your name tag." The world seemed to tilt. Emma felt every pair of eyes in the store on her as she unclipped the plastic badge from her uniform. With quiet dignity, she placed it on the counter and turned away. No excuses, no pleading, just silence. The automatic doors slid open, and rain embraced her again as she walked into the night, her thin jacket soaking through instantly. Each step was heavy, but her chest carried a strange steadiness. She would do it again. She knew that with certainty. By noon the next day, her phone would not stop buzzing. Mr. Hall had wasted no time posting on the Millfield Community Facebook page. SmartMart enforces strict policies against employee theft. Remember, enabling vagrancy hurts our community. His words spread like fire. Messages poured in. "You could have just given him your own food," texted Casey, her friend from work. "What were you thinking? Jobs are hard to find these days," her cousin wrote bluntly. Even her mother's voice carried a trace of disappointment. "Emma, honey, your heart is good, but we need that income." The weight pressed down harder with each passing hour. At the diner where she applied for work, the manager's eyes lingered on her too long before shaking his head. "Sorry, no positions available right now." She didn't miss the flicker of recognition in his gaze. Word had already spread. By evening, Emma discovered a photo of herself circulating online. Her face, captured from SmartMart's security footage, was captioned, "The sandwich thief steals from employers to feed drifters." The comment section became a battlefield. Some called her selfish, irresponsible, or naive. A few defended her. It was going to be wasted food anyway, but their voices were quickly drowned out. The landlord's voice added another blow over the phone. "Having trouble with this month's rent, Miss Lewis?" "I'll have it by Friday," Emma promised, though she had no idea how. At dinner, she and her mother shared a pot of instant noodles. The silence between them was heavy until her mother finally sighed. "Your father was the same way, always helping others before thinking of himself." Emma lowered her gaze. "Is that such a bad thing?" "It is when you can't help yourself first," her mother replied softly. No anger, just worry, the kind that lived in her eyes every day. Emma retreated to the library later that evening, filling out 5 more job applications. Each rejection stung sharper than the last. On the news, a headline glared at her from the glowing screen. "Local business stands firm against handouts." The comments echoed the same refrain. "Rules exist for a reason." She closed her phone, buried her face in her hands, and wept for the first time since her father's funeral. Not for her lost job, but for the cruel truth pressing in. Kindness had somehow become controversial. When she finally hung her coat by the door that night, a metallic clink hit the floor. Emma bent down and found a small, tarnished badge glinting faintly under the dim light. Confused, she picked it up. A Navy SEAL trident. Behind it, folded neatly, was a note written in precise, steady handwriting. "Some debts can never be repaid, but they are never forgotten. KB." Her breath caught. The old man from the night before, he must have slipped it into her pocket. She searched the symbol online, her eyes widening as she read about the Navy SEALs, their brutal training, their code of honor. This was no ordinary veteran. Emma placed the badge carefully on her nightstand. A strange calm washed over her, cutting through the storm of gossip, rejection, and fear. Whatever the world thought of her, she knew the truth. She had chosen compassion over convenience, dignity over rules. And despite everything she had lost, she would do it again. Morning came with a sound that made Emma bolt upright in bed, the deep, thunderous thump of helicopter rotors. The entire apartment trembled. She stumbled to the window, pulling the curtains aside, and gasped. 3 military helicopters hovered low above the SmartMart parking lot. Below them, a convoy of Humvees and transport trucks rolled into precise formation. Traffic on the main road came to a standstill as neighbors spilled out of their homes, phones raised to capture the spectacle. "Emma!" Her mother rushed into the room, eyes wide. "What on earth is happening? The whole town is going crazy." Emma's gaze fell to the trident badge resting on her nightstand. Her chest tightened with sudden understanding. She pulled on her clothes, barely hearing her mother's voice, and ran the 6 blocks toward the store, her breath sharp in the cold morning air. By the time she arrived, a crowd had gathered, murmurs rising and falling like waves. At the center of it all, Marines in crisp dress blues had formed a ceremonial corridor leading from the lead vehicle to the store entrance. American flags snapped in the wind, and a brass military band struck up a solemn march. The crowd hushed, awed into silence. From the formation stepped a tall officer, his uniform heavy with decorations, his bearing commanding. The insignia on his shoulder marked him as a colonel. His voice carried easily across the hushed parking lot. "Are you the manager of this establishment?" he asked. Mr. Hall shuffled forward from the store entrance, his usual arrogance cracked and trembling. "Yes, sir. Is there a problem?" "I believe there is," the colonel replied, his tone calm but edged with steel. "Yesterday evening, one of your employees was terminated after providing sustenance to a gentleman waiting outside your store. Is this correct?" Hall's face reddened. "Store policy clearly states," but the colonel cut him off, his voice rising. "The man your employee assisted was Sergeant Major Kenneth Brooks, Medal of Honor recipient, Navy SEAL Team 6, retired." A ripple of shock surged through the crowd. Parents lifted their children higher to see. Cameras zoomed closer. Live streams crackled across the internet. The colonel's voice grew sharper, every word striking like a hammer. Sergeant Major Brooks led the mission that rescued 37 hostages in Baghdad in '91. At Khe Sanh, Vietnam, he carried 3 wounded men through enemy fire after being shot twice himself. Last night, at the age of 78, he was walking home in the rain from his wife's funeral after his car broke down. And rather than ask for help, he endured alone. Gasps swept through the crowd. Mr. Hall's face drained of all color. The colonel scanned the assembly, his gaze searching. "Where is Emma Lewis?" Emma froze in place. Her name rang out like a bell in the stunned silence. For a moment, she wanted to vanish into the crowd, to let the earth swallow her. But then she felt the weight of the badge in her pocket. Slowly, she stepped forward, her clothes wrinkled from the night before, her hair still damp from her run. "I'm here," she said quietly. The colonel turned, and to the astonishment of everyone watching, he saluted her. The Marines followed suit, a wave of hands raised in crisp, precise motion. "Miss Lewis," the colonel declared, "on behalf of the United States Marine Corps and the Navy SEALs Association, I want to thank you for your kindness to our brother in arms." The formation parted, and from the lead vehicle emerged the old man Emma had fed the night before. But he was transformed, his uniform immaculate, medals gleaming in the morning light. His posture still straight, though his frame was frail. Sergeant Major Kenneth Brooks walked slowly toward her. The Marines stood at rigid attention, their eyes forward, their respect absolute. Emma's throat tightened. Tears pricked her eyes as he stopped in front of her. His voice was softer now, but carried across the hushed crowd. "You didn't know who I was. You just saw someone who needed help. That's what true character is." He opened his hand. Inside was a small velvet box. "The Commander-in-Chief sends his personal regards. Your scholarship to complete your nursing degree has been approved. Full tuition, plus expenses." Emma's vision blurred as tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't do it for recognition," she whispered, her voice breaking. "That," Sergeant Brooks said, a smile tugging at his lips, "is precisely why you deserve it." The crowd erupted into cheers. Applause thundered across the parking lot. Strangers who had whispered about her days earlier now shouted her name in celebration. Her mother pushed through the mass of people, her face streaked with tears. She threw her arms around Emma, holding her as if to never let go. "Your father would be so proud," she sobbed. Emma clung to her mother, her voice steady despite the tears. "I told you, Mom. Kindness is never wrong." Nearby, Mr. Hall tried to slip away quietly, but a reporter intercepted him, shoving a microphone in his face. "Mr. Hall, how do you feel about firing someone for an act of kindness toward a national hero?" Cameras flashed, recording his stammering, incoherent response as the tide of public opinion shifted permanently. For Emma, none of that mattered. She stood surrounded by Marines, her mother, and a man who had carried the weight of wars on his shoulders. And in that moment, she knew the world had seen the truth. Compassion, no matter how small, could change everything. 6 months passed, and the noise of that extraordinary day in Millfield had long since faded. The helicopters, the salutes, The viral headlines, those belonged to yesterday's news cycle. Emma Lewis now walked across her university campus in fresh nursing scrubs, her books pressed tightly against her chest. Her clinical rotation at the Veterans Affairs Hospital was about to begin, a milestone that once felt unreachable. Students sometimes recognized her as she passed, whispering to each other, "That's the sandwich girl." Emma never corrected them, never lingered on the story. She would just smile faintly and move on. To her, it wasn't about titles or virality or any spotlight the world tried to cast. It was about the patients waiting for her at the hospital, the elderly men and women who carried decades of untold stories. Inside the VA hospital, Emma occasionally saw Sergeant Major Brooks. Time had not dulled his presence. His gait was slower now, but his voice was still firm, and his stories carried the weight of a lifetime of service. Yet he never mentioned that rainy night. Instead, he spoke to Emma about battlefield medicine, about the nurses who had pulled men back from the edge of death, and about the way compassion had often mattered more than courage. "The world needs healers more than it needs warriors," he told her once, his blue eyes steady. "Always has." Those words echoed within Emma, shaping the path she now followed. She found herself drawn to geriatric care, choosing to focus on the elderly, the forgotten, those left to sit quietly in the corners of life. "They have so much to teach us," she explained to her clinical supervisor, "and too often no one listens." Meanwhile, back at SmartMart, change had quietly taken root. Mr. Hall had been transferred to another location, his name fading into whispers rather than headlines. In his place, new management had introduced what the community came to call the Emma Lewis policy. All unsold food approaching expiration was to be donated to local shelters. The response was overwhelming. Families who had once criticized Emma now lined up to volunteer. A small plaque appeared near the store entrance, simple and unadorned. It read, "In honor of silent heroes who choose kindness." No names were listed, no grand speeches attached, just the quiet acknowledgement Emma would have wanted. On her birthday, Emma received a package without a return address. Inside was a first edition of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Tucked inside the front cover was a handwritten note, to remind you that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom to choose. KB. Emma May pressed her fingers against the words, her throat tightening. She never told anyone about the monthly donations she now made to the Veterans Assistance Fund, exactly the amount of her old SmartMart salary. Nor did she speak of her regular volunteer shifts at the homeless shelter, where many nodded quietly when she walked in. No questions, no fanfare, just respect. Her mother, too, had found steadier work. Their household was no longer weighed down by despair, though the memory of struggle lingered in every small victory. When they passed someone on the street holding a cardboard sign, neither woman looked away anymore. They carried the lesson with them. One autumn evening, as the leaves scattered across campus, Emma paused by the Veterans Memorial. A young girl in a junior ROTC uniform stood there, her posture crisp, her face solemn. She placed a single flower at the base of the monument, then stood at attention for exactly 1 minute. Emma watched silently, a small smile forming. The circle continued. That night, she returned to her journal, its pages already filled with months of reflections. She wrote carefully, her words steady. "Kindness isn't heroic, it's human. It's what we owe each other." On the inside cover, she taped a small fortune cookie slip she had once saved. "Your greatest contribution may be the one no one ever sees." People sometimes asked her if she would do it all again, knowing what she knew now, the humiliation, the firing, the tears, and the struggle. Emma never hesitated. "Some things," she always said softly, "are the right choice, no matter the outcome." Because the world had seen it, hadn't it? Not in headlines or hashtags, but in the quiet way a single act of compassion had rippled outward. It had changed her life, touched a soldier's heart, and reminded a weary town that kindness, however small, could still win. And in her heart, Emma knew this was never about recognition. It was about a sandwich, a stranger in the rain, and the choice to act when no one else would. Justice may come late, recognition may never come at all, but kindness endures. If you believe that, follow, share, and keep these silent stories alive. Because heroes never fade. Because kindness, even when unseen, always echoes through generations.